In this video tutorial, we'll discuss replicating data between two Buffalo TeraStation NAS devices on the same LAN. Now in this example, I will use two identical TeraStation Pro Duo devices, but you can mix and match your TeraStations. Just make sure that they both support replication, and we always recommend that you update both to the latest firmware just to make sure that the replication is completely compatible and then you're able to use all the latest updates. Now, to start with this, we'll configure either one first, but we'll go ahead and start with the first TeraStation, which I've named Brian 1. I have tab browsing set up as well, and I have a Brian 2 TeraStation. So we're going to do a setup replication between Brian 1 and Brian 2. Now, to log into your TeraStations, you can use Buffalo's NAS Navigator software or type the hostname or IP address into any browser. What I'm going to do is go ahead and log into the Brian 1 TeraStation. And by default, we'll go to the folder setup area where we can set up our shares. Now the default share is there. Now we can use that for replication if we'd like, but for the sake of this demo, I'm going to go ahead and create a separate share that's empty to use for this replication job. So to do that, I'm going to press this Create Folder button, which will start a folder creation wizard. I'm going to name this folder source just because it's easy and it is going to be our data source. You can name it whatever you want though. And pretty much the default settings are fine here. I will disable the recycle bin just because in replication I don't want to replicate the recycle bin as I delete data, but that's purely an option. And when I'm done, I'm going to press the Save button. And that'll deploy a source shared folder on the Brian 1 TeraStation. That's it for now for the Brian 1 device. Now what we'll do is create a target share on the Brian 2. So I'm going to switch over to this tab and log into my Brian 2 TeraStation. I'm going to repeat a very similar process. I'm going to create a new shared folder for this device, and I will call it target. Again, this is just a convenient name for the sake of this demo. I'll disable the recycle bin on this one as well. Now this is the one important step that we did not do on the source side. For any target share or for any share to be able to receive a replication from another TeraStation, the disk backup option needs to be checked. This tells the TeraStation to broadcast and allow that target folder to be able to receive replication from other TeraStations. If there's multiple TeraStations on the network or you're sharing administration abilities, you may want to put a remote backup password on there, which makes it so when you're configuring replication on, in this case, Brian 1, you have to provide a password to be able to access this. However, since I'm the only administrator, I'm going to go ahead and leave that blank because it's just redundant security since I am the only admin that can log into these. But if that is the case, you do have the ability to password protect this replication target from receiving replication jobs. Also, as I didn't mention on the Brian 1, you can go ahead and configure access restrictions. The replication will run underneath that all at a lower level process. So your users, you can still use access restriction and replicate. But for the sake of this demo, we will not use access restrictions. I'll go ahead and press Save to deploy this share. So now on the Brian 2 TeraStation, I have this target shared, which is what's going to receive it. You can also see that disk backup is a supported feature of it. I'm going to switch back over to my Brian 1 TeraStation now. You can see the source share there, and disk backup is not required for the sending unit. It's also worth noting that the way Buffalo's TeraStation replication works is it's a very push-based methodology. So you want to use the TeraStation and configure a replication job where you're pushing from that local device to a remote target. And that's all configured under the Systems tab area. And then there's a Backup sub-tab. Now in the Backup sub-tab, there's two basic types of backup. There's the scheduled type of backup, which is configured under Backup Job Setup. So this would be a nightly or a weekly backup job. And you can compress it, and you can do a lot of advanced things, sort of like configured similarly to a tape backup type backup profile. Or you can use the replication, which is a real-time data replication, which basically takes whatever files come into the source folder, they immediately replicate it as quickly as possible to the backup targets folder. With a very simple setup, there's not very much detailed configuration. It is real-time, so it's not scheduled. If you want to do a scheduled backup, use the Backup Jobs wizard. But for this demo, we'll do real-time replication. And to start that, we're going to press the Add button. That's going to scan our entire network. Actually, it's going to scan the entire local TeraStation, all of its folders, and then it's going to scan all of the remote TeraStations on the LAN and see which ones have that disk backup checked. If I do need to type a password in to include that, that's done in this search for backup destination by password area. Now, depending on how many TeraStations you have on your network, this scan can take up to a minute or so. When it's done, the loading will disappear and we can actually click on these pull-down menus. Now that the replication scan is done, you can see I can pull down both the backup source and the backup target. We'll start by selecting the backup source. This is going to show me every share and every folder beneath the share that's on this. So there was a folder called folder 1 underneath share, but as I told in the beginning, we will use the source shared folder as our backup source. And then we're going to push it to whatever target we want. So when we use this pull down, we can see all of the TeraStations on the network that have a disk backup share available. So we are going to target the Brian 2's TeraStations target folder. Click that, and we'll press save. You will get a warning. The way our replication works is we are going to immediately copy everything from that source to that target, and the first step of that is to erase anything that's in the target share. So you want to make sure that there isn't any data in that target share, or if there is data in that target share, that you don't mind it being overwritten. So once you've confirmed that, you can press the OK button, and then it'll deploy that job. And you can see here we have a backup source, which is the local source folder, and it's going to go to Brian 2's target shared folder. I can go ahead and repeat this wizard and create different replication jobs. I can send that same backup source to a different target, or I can select a different backup source and send it to a different target. So you can have multiple jobs in here and replicate, one to many or many to one or those types of things. It's also worth noting that once you deploy it, just like we have, it can take about 30 seconds or so for it to set up all the shares. During that period, those shares may or may not be available, so you will have to wait a few seconds before you can access those shares. What I'm going to do now is minimize my browser, and we can actually look at the shared folders. So what I have here is my Brian 1 and my Brian 2 TeraStation, just accessing it through Windows Explorer. I'm going to go into the source share on Brian 1 and the target share on Brian 2. And you can see that there's nothing in them because they are brand new shares. What I'm going to do is I have about 200 megs worth of zip files here. I'm going to copy them into Brian 1, and then we'll see them immediately replicate behind the scenes to Brian 2. Now this computer is on a 10100 connection, so it will take a little while for these to come through. But as they copy in, you'll start to see the fragments and cookie crumbs show up in Brian 2. Windows only refreshes every few seconds, so it may take a few seconds for it to show up, but you can see the replication happening in near real time. So now the 200 megs are over in Brian 1, and you can see the files coming in. Data1.zip and data2.zip are already finished, and data3 will be the next one that's sent, which is the large one. You can see its cookie crumbs coming in, and there you have it. I just replicated 200 megs in real time. This is synchronous replication, so now if I were to delete or modify the name of this data1, I'm going to go ahead and press the delete key. It will delete it from Brian 2. So you have a real-time snapshot of what's going on. And you can again do this to multiple different devices. Similarly, you can create a new folder, and that new folder will also show up in the target shared folder area. And that pretty much concludes how to set up replication. Please stay tuned for the next video where we will replicate to a TeraStation that is over the internet and not on the same LAN. Thank you for watching this video tutorial.